When you think about public health, what comes to mind? Probably labs, hospitals, government agencies, right? But what if I told you that one of the most powerful partners in keeping communities healthy is a place millions of us visit every single week? Today, we're diving into the surprising and incredibly effective alliance between faith and public health. It's a partnership that just might hold the key to solving some of our biggest health crises.
So here's the fundamental question public health experts face every day. How do you actually solve a major health crisis? It's one thing to have the science and the right medical advice, but it's a completely different challenge to get that information to diverse communities in a way they'll hear, trust, and actually act on. And this is a much bigger hurdle than you might think. I mean, just look at this number. A study in Delaware found that almost half, 49.6% of the people they surveyed had what's called problematic or inadequate health literacy. In plain English, that means nearly 1 out of every 2 people struggles to find, understand, and use even basic health information. This isn't just a Delaware thing, it's a huge problem everywhere, and it shows why vital health messages so often fail to connect.
Okay, so if the traditional top-down methods just aren't cutting it, where do we go? Well, the answer seems to be about shifting our focus. It's about building trust where it already exists, in the familiar places that are the bedrock of our communities. And for millions of people, that trusted, familiar place is their church.
And that brings us right to our main focus, this powerful, and for some, totally unexpected ally in public health. We're talking about faith-based organizations. They have a kind of reach and a deep-seated trust that public health agencies are realizing is absolutely invaluable.
Let this sink in for a minute. Around 40% of Americans go to a worship service at least once a week. That is a massive, regularly gathered audience. Think about it from a public health standpoint. That's millions of people gathering in the same place, week after week. It's an incredible, ready-made opportunity for outreach. And as this quote makes so clear, it's about so much more than just the numbers. For so many, especially in the African American community, the church isn't just a building you visit on Sunday. It's the institutional backbone. It's a hub for social life, for community support, for organizing, for everything. It's a place of deep, profound trust. So let's break down how this actually works on the ground. It really starts with the power of the place itself. The church is so much more than just a venue.
I mean, think about the practical advantages here. Churches often already have kitchens, classrooms, and big meeting rooms, perfect for things like health screenings or cooking classes. You've got regular access to a group of people who show up consistently. They're stable places with members who've been coming for years, which makes long-term programs possible. And maybe most importantly, the idea of health, of caring for the body and soul, is often baked right into their mission.
And they can be incredibly innovative. Take a look at this quote from a church leader in Alabama during the pandemic. They couldn't meet inside, so they started an outreach church on the square in a public park to safely connect with everyone. This is a perfect example of what public health is all about, meeting the community exactly where they are.
Okay, so the physical space is one part of the puzzle, but the other crucial half? It's the people leading these spaces. Pastors, ministers, and other clergy members are these incredible role models and gatekeepers, and their influence just cannot be overstated.
But here's where things get really interesting, and maybe a little surprising. When you look at the health of pastors themselves, one study found that a staggering 80% were overweight or obese. That's significantly higher than the rate for the general population, which is around 69%. This shows a real vulnerability, but it also points to a huge opportunity.
So you might be asking, okay, but why does a pastor's personal health matter so much? Well, it matters because their health journey, for better or for worse, doesn't just belong to them. It sends a powerful, unspoken message to their entire congregation.
And here's why. Research shows that pastors know their role models. They see themselves as influential, and they're almost always the key decision maker, the person who gives the green light for any new program in the church. So when a pastor gets behind a health initiative, or even just shares their own struggles and successes, it carries an enormous amount of weight.
But just having influence isn't enough to guarantee action. What actually motivates a leader to step up? Well, this study on HIV prevention among pastors in Madagascar is so revealing.
The single biggest factor that predicted whether a pastor would recommend HIV prevention wasn't their level of education. In fact, that had a negative association. It was knowing someone personally who was at risk. That personal connection was over 16 times more powerful than other factors. It tells you that for leaders, this is personal.
So this brings us to the message itself. You can't just take a generic health brochure and expect it to work. The information has to be translated. It needs to be made culturally and, just as importantly, spiritually relevant for the people you're trying to reach.
To get this right, researchers have a really helpful framework. They talk about two different levels of cultural sensitivity: surface structure and deep structure. Let's quickly break down what that actually means.
So surface structure is about the stuff you can see and hear. It's using pictures of people from the community, talking about familiar foods, playing gospel music in the background. This is all super important because it makes people open to listening. It increases receptivity. But deep structure, that's the real game changer. This is about tapping into the core beliefs and values of a community, ideas about family, about community responsibility, about faith itself. That's what determines if a program actually has a lasting impact.
In this quote from a focus group, it is a perfect, powerful example of a deep structure belief. You see this coexistence of medicine and faith. A person believes treatment helps, but that the ultimate outcome rests with God. Any health program that ignores or dismisses that deeply held belief is doomed to fail. You have to work with it, respectfully.
So how do you put all of this together in the real world? The Body and Soul program is a fantastic model. It's built on 4 key pillars. First, you get the pastor on board to champion it. Second, you make changes to the church environment, like serving healthier food at events. Third, you provide the educational materials. And fourth, and this is so key, you train lay members of the church to be peer counselors supporting their friends and neighbors. It's brilliant because it tackles the individual, the environment, and the social network all at once.
Now, let's be real. This all sounds great, but it's not easy. It would be totally misleading to pretend these partnerships don't come with some major challenges, and we have to acknowledge these real-world barriers if we want to build trust.
And the barriers are significant. You have deep historical mistrust of medical research, especially in Black communities, thanks to horrific legacies like the Tuskegee study. You've got pastors who are already overworked and stretched thin. There can be a lot of stigma around sensitive topics like mental health or HIV. And then you have very practical concerns about the separation of church and state, or simply a lack of money and volunteers.
And this isn't just speculation. The research confirms it. In one study, when pastors explained why they turned down a health program, the top 2 reasons had nothing to do with the health topic itself. It was about competing priorities and concerns over church and state separation. These are real, practical issues. So, when you boil it all down, what's the secret to making this work? It's not about just dropping a program into a church. Success comes from building authentic partnerships. It has to be a two-way street, built on mutual respect and a genuinely shared goal. It's the difference between doing something to a community versus doing something with them.
And really, the success of these church-based programs makes you think, doesn't it? It forces us to ask a bigger question. The church is one powerful example of a trusted community hub, but what other spaces hold that same kind of key? What about barbershops, or community centers, or local libraries? Where else can we build the trust that's so essential for creating better health for everyone? That's something worth thinking about.